Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. This episode is the first of a series we're doing called Coach Studies. Our team of experts from our YouTube series, Coaching Fundamentals, is back again, this time focusing on a deep discussion about specific coaching case studies. We're calling them Coach Studies. We're super excited about this episode because it's a sneak preview to a new project we're working on here at Eduro Learning, and we know you're going to love it. So instead of sharing just a spotlight here on YouTube today, we're including the full episode. We'll be sharing more about the Coach Studies project as it gets closer. In this episode, our first full Coach Studies episode, we're looking at specific teacher archetypes that all coaches will be familiar with. Today's conversation was about how to work with the content expert. Carrie Lee, Tim, Diana, and I talk about all the different ways we might approach and work with this type of teacher. Just the four of us came up with 11 different strategies. Have you worked with the content expert in your school? What strategy worked best for you? Do you want to be part of conversations like this? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoy any part of this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more conversations like this, please subscribe to our channel and click the notifications bell to find out every time we release a new episode. Remember, you can also listen to the full Coach Better episode wherever you get your podcasts. We are passionate about the impact coaching can have on student learning, school culture, and teacher professional growth, and we want to help you coach better. We've got some great opportunities for more learning after today's conversation, so stick around all the way to the end. All right, welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. Today I am joined by several of our amazing YouTube series Coaching Fundamentals guests. I have Tim, Diana, and Carrie Lee on the call with me today, and we're going to do something fun. We decided the last time that we met that we all have these archetypal teachers that we work with that are challenging for us as coaches. And they're challenging in lots of different ways. Sometimes they're challenging because they're over-enthusiastic. Sometimes they're challenging because they're resistant. And we thought we would share some of our case studies, which we're calling Coach Studies, and talk about how we might ideally work with these people to get different perspectives on how different coaches might handle a very similar scenario. Because probably all of us in all of our various schools have had a person like the person we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that person, that specific coach study, and I have to give credit for that name to Clint, even though he's not here with us today, it was his idea. Let's all introduce ourselves and tell everybody who we are. And I'm going to start with Tim. Tim, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tim Bray, also sometimes known as T.S. Bray. I am the Director of Educational Technology at Cheongna Dalton School in Incheon, Korea. And coaching is a part of my role because I'm a department of one.
Thank you. And Diana, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm an innovation coach at the American International School of Guangzhou in China, and I'm also the Academy Mentor for Eduro Learning's The Coach.
Thank you. And Carrie Lee, last but not least.
Hi, I'm the Director of Digital Learning at James World Academy in Switzerland. So yeah.
Awesome. And our coach study for today is the content expert, and I'm going to read it as it's written here, and then you guys jump in if you have like other details, because this is just like an amalgam of many different people that we have all worked with in various schools. So it's not one particular person, it's just kind of this type of person. So the content expert. This teacher is a content king. They teach diploma and get excellent results with the formula they've used for many years. They use technology, but in specific, highly scaffolded ways. The school is moving towards a more personalized approach, so modifications to the program to cater for the needs of this person's students is a possible avenue forward for the coach. A challenge for you as the coach is that they feel you have nothing of value to add as you do not understand this particular subject to the extent that the content expert does. The content expert also has little time to devote to meetings and has a lot of marking to keep up with. The content expert is very committed to the school's football team, whom he or she coaches twice a week. And one item that we were talking about this person before, is what is diploma? And the diploma program is the last 2 years of high school in an international baccalaureate school. So you could, if you aren't familiar with the IB diploma program, you could think of this as AP or any higher level secondary course that is externally assessed. Did I miss anything?
No, you got it.
All right. So we've got some probing questions we can start with, but does anyone want to jump in right now with some thoughts about the content expert and how they might start to approach this person in their coaching role?
Well, okay. I will jump in on something. At a previous school that I won't name, I had a lot of people that it was a competitive environment in a way, but in what I felt was kind of a nurturing way. It was a good competitiveness. And so all I had to do sometimes is kind of just drop a hint of oh, I saw teacher so-and-so doing this in their room. And then there would just kind of naturally be this, what? Oh, I'm not going to fall behind him, or I'm not going to fall behind her. And so within the department, you could kind of plant some seeds. And then it was kind of more organic because there are people in the same subject. And so when I'd have the problem of but you don't teach math, Tim, it would be okay, but I know this person in your department is doing this and it's pretty awesome. You should go check it out.
I would agree with along those lines as far as in any kind of coaching situation where you're find the people that are open to getting that kind of support and doing those things. Because sometimes what they need is they need to see somebody else doing it. Like Tim mentioned, if they see other people, they and this is at any level, that I found this at any level, elementary through secondary, is finding kind of those, we'll refer to them as lighthouses, that type of thing, then we have people that they know that you can refer to, like Tim was talking about, as far as, I know somebody else is doing this. It's really great if it's in their content area as well. So for them to see some examples, particularly in their own school, in their own grade band and that type of thing, when they start to see somebody else doing it, it can help kind of show them how they can do this despite all the things that they have on their plate.
And I think one challenge might be, especially if you've worked with this person for several years and it's kind of built up as almost an established tension. They know that you want them to try something new and you know that they really don't want to. The first question in our discussion points was, how do you build rapport and get them to trust you as a coach? I think your ideas about sharing what's happening in other classrooms is always a good place to start. I also think there has to be some sort of personal connection that we try to start to make. And ideally, it's probably not about school at all, because the issue probably is here that the content expert feels really confident in the subject area they teach, and they're doing well, and their students are doing well, and they're probably well liked, because usually when students are succeeding, they like their teacher. So there's no real impetus for this person to change, aside from maybe the change in the school's direction. But I think we all know plenty of times when teachers have just waited out a change in direction and just kind of stuck with their own way of doing things, and they never really did need to change. So I guess my point here is there a personal connection that's possible to make with this person? There is mention of the football team. I don't know if that is an avenue for every coach, but I'm wondering about any sort of personal connections you can make. And I'm personally thinking about a person that I worked with that was very similar to this, and I do remember once I figured out a personal connection, and I did that actually through another colleague who is a friend of this person. Because they were friends, I was like, oh, what does the content expert like? How can I approach them on a personal level and just kind of start a dialogue? And that didn't necessarily lead to any in-depth coaching, but it definitely led to more open conversations that were not that kind of tense, we both know what we're trying to do here, and neither one of us is going to let it happen situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Kim. And when I was thinking about, just before you were speaking, I was thinking it doesn't have to be you as the coach that is the person that's really helping nudge them forward. But I totally agree, it has to be you, the person that has that professional and hopefully more personal connection with them. And you can always find something. And I like the way that you did a little digging through the friend. And one of my strategies that's worked for me in the past is usually there'll be someone either Diana said, on the department, or as Tim mentioned, in the building that's doing something like that. But so finding those avenues of who does the content expert trust or respect, and how can I connect with those people and leverage those connections as well. It sounds sneaky. It's not at all meant to be. It's genuine need and want to build a relationship. But I think we need to use as many tools as we possibly can to make that happen.
I think you raised. Sorry, go ahead, Diana.
We bring up the point is, like, particularly with these classes, these type of classes that are connected to an external assessment, there's a lot of pressure in that, and to keep that in mind. But also that there are people out there doing things in these type of situations that can provide examples for them, and then bringing those in as well. I think for me, that's finding other people that are teaching the same content, that are doing the more innovative type things, to show them examples. And I think the challenge comes with, I've been doing this, we've been getting good test results, so why do I need to change? So that's another thing, another kind of aspect of that we have to take a look at.
Yeah, I was thinking about the finding examples outside of the school too, and then in combination with what Carrie Lee was saying about having another teacher start the discussion, because maybe you as the coach sharing an example of what other teachers from other schools do is probably just going to keep like building that tension. Like, look, you aren't as good as these other teachers. But if a friend in the department could say, hey, I read this, or I saw this, or I noticed this, is this something we might be able to do? That might be a nice combination of all of the things we've kind of talked about already, like a little bit of, kind of competition expectation, a little bit of using a personal connection through another teacher in the department, and then a little bit of here's a concrete example of here's what's possible. Just because it's, diploma, I don't know, chemistry doesn't mean you can't do something.
I think I want to go back to this little nugget we had where the person's a coach. And the reason why I want to go back to that is I think that's also an open doorway. And I think if you can, if even if you're not a sports person, if you could find a way to show like, hey, this is a really cool thing you could do that would help your athletes, right? This is something like, use this app. Like a lot of the PE teachers I've worked with, they're really into having students or athletes record something they do, and then they critique their own work, like their own performance. So they have other team members critique it. And so if you kind of like start that dialogue there, and then have the conversation about, yeah, your quarterback's great, or your midfielder is great, but you want them to be better, right? And then you can kind of have that subtle dialogue of, you're kind of like my star quarterback, and I kind of want you to be even better than you already are. And then hopefully that, because you've built that relationship and you've framed it initially off of something that was non-threatening, because it's the sports team, right? I mean, they have high stakes too, right? But it's a completely different feel. And so that dialogue might be able to be started by kind of pushing on that point instead of having to go down the actual content road initially.
I love that idea. I think that is such a good idea, because coming at it from the sports angle, the non-classroom teacher angle is a safe bet, right? Like there's no one's holding on to anything so dear to, their person when it comes to athletic coaching. Really, we all just want the team to be the best it can be. And I know we all feel that way about the classroom, but there's so much time and expertise and craft that goes into being a classroom teacher. And not to say that it doesn't as a coach, but I think it's just a slightly different dynamic. And I think that's a great strategy, Tim. Just allows you to build a personal connection, also show the power of what you can offer, that you do also know something. And then I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable saying to another colleague, like, you're like my star quarterback. But if you had a way to say, like, do you see any connections to the classroom or something, like, I think that would be a great avenue in.
Like you said, that's all about building the relationship and finding the connections in that. And I think all the different advice that we're offering is, then you have to craft kind of a plan based on those factors of your relationship with them, and what kind of person you know them to be in that. So that definitely, the relationship, and then how you make that approach as well.
And I want to come back to something Carrie Lee said. Sorry.
Oh, good. What did I say?
Carrie Lee said. Sorry.
Oh, good. What did I say?
You said it sounds sneaky, but it's not. And I think that is a really, really important point to like make very, very clear, because I think the challenge we all have as coaches is none of us are in an evaluatory role. We're all peers. We have only influence. We have no authority, right? So sometimes we have to think really creatively about how we approach different members of our staff. And some people are going to be really interested immediately and ready and willing to work with us, and some people aren't. And for the people that aren't, it doesn't mean we can just ignore them and leave them behind, especially in this scenario where there's a specific issue that the school is moving in a certain direction and this teacher isn't coming along. Well, then it's our job to support them the same way we would support every student in the classroom. So I think sometimes these strategies can appear to be manipulative or sneaky, but actually it's our way of differentiating for the individual needs on our staff. And sometimes you do have to be a little strategic like that. And I think particularly for new coaches, it can be a little bit challenging to think about, oh, I'm being strategic with my peers. Like that feels a little bit icky. But if we think about it more like it's differentiation, this is the personal connection we need to make with this person to be able to open the door to a deeper conversation. That's not sneaky, that's differentiation.
Yeah, and I think that's something I wanted to highlight as well, that parallel between coaching and teaching, and that for our students, one of the most powerful things I think that you can do is know your students really well. And as coaches, that for us, that means knowing our teachers really well. And if we know that they've got 2 kids and their baby's up all night, or they've just got a new puppy, there's lots of different things that we can do to build the relationship and to help, like perfect example of what Tim said, of make those connections that to the sports team that they're helping, that you can also then leverage to move into a shift in perhaps classroom practice. But I think that knowing your people is really what it comes down to, and knowing them well and caring about them.
It makes me wonder, just thinking aloud, is it just a personality maybe clash when things start off a little bit like this? Is it like, just out of curiosity, like because I know we've all dealt with at least one, if not many, teachers like this. So I know we can all really relate to this. Like my first thought is it just they don't gel with you as a person? Or is there a vulnerability there, a concern that if you ask me to change something, then someone's going to see what I'm doing in my classroom? Or is there a vulnerability there where I don't know how to do that, so therefore I'm not going to, how do we figure that out? Because I think that's another area of knowing our teachers the way we know our students too. What exactly is the stumbling block causing the content expert to not want to work with us? And how do we find that out?
Actually, I just recently rediscovered from Elena Aguilera. She's a instructional coach. She's written like The Art of Coaching and that. And she has what she calls Mind the Gap. And I've just recently been reminded of it, and I pulled it back up. And it's a way to look at some different areas of what's causing the challenge. And so kind of a lens to look at is it the knowledge that they just need more knowledge about this? I just pulled it up again. She has is it skill and knowledge? Is it capacity? Do they have the time and resources to do what they need to do? There's an aspect of emotional intelligence as well. So, and it's not the only framework that you could use, but it is one that I was reminded about recently as a way to kind of think about, okay, or even for myself, when I look at them, I'm having a challenge with this. So where's the gap? What do I need to move forward? Maybe I just need a little bit more skill, or that type of thing. So there, like I said, it's not the only framework out there, but some ways to kind of drill down to what's really this challenge. And then when we have a better idea of that, then we can have a much more, I think, effective approach to it.
And I think that's a little bit in the difference. We're talking about when coaching is like teaching and when it's not like teaching. And I think what you're talking about, Diana, is when it's not like teaching, right? Because in most scenarios, generally speaking, most students feel like I'm the learner and the teacher is the teacher, regardless of how we're trying to set that up in the classroom. It's kind of like the framework of school, right? But in the case where we're working with our peers, that's not that's not how it is. And especially when they are a content area expert, especially at the higher levels of secondary school, we really do have to dig a little deeper to figure out exactly what is the challenge there. So I think that's a great framework, and I've already put it in the show notes. So that will be in the show notes below when you're watching.
And to jump in on that, it reminded me of something in the cognitive coaching where they look at field-dependent versus field-independent learners and what your style is predominantly. So field-dependent tend to be quite collaborative and they want to work together and all of that sort of stuff. Field-independent prefer to work alone. They really focus on data and assessment and all of those sort of details. And it's interesting to know what your tendency is as a coach and what the other person is themselves so that you can modify your approach to best suit the needs of that particular individual. So for me, I'm a very collaborative person. I love working with others and I'm less focused on those details perhaps, but I know that when I'm working with people that are focused on those details, I need to be able to say, here's how it's going to improve student learning. Here's an example of where it's been done in your subject. Here are 3 people that you can contact to talk to you further about that. So I've covered all those bases for them. So it's as much as matching to their style and so I guess knowing your learners, but also knowing yourself and how you can adjust your style to suit their needs.
That is such a good point too, because that's coming back to a way that coaching is like teaching is you can't always just behave the same with every single person. You have to figure out what their needs are and then adapt and mold for them. I really appreciate that. If we're thinking about this same person, and I know this is an archetypal person, it's not an actual person, do you guys have any thoughts about who would be a good person to go to help support him? We've talked about people in the department being a good support. We've talked about potentially maybe athletes or other coaches being good support. Is there anybody else, and friends, is there anybody else that as coaches we can go to support a teacher's needs that we're really struggling to get to?
That comes to an excellent question. And I think what happens is it really depends on what kind of admin team you have as well. And again, back to this person's relationship with that team, because it might be that this person wants somebody who's of higher authority or more experienced to be that person who's helping them and coaching them. I noticed, I think I felt a lot of that when I was slightly younger. Not that I'm old now, but slightly younger. But it was a time I did notice when I was in my 30s, like a lot of times the teachers that were in their 50s, it wasn't that they were discounting me, but at the same time, my approach had to be very carefully structured and planned out in order to kind of reach some of them. But I built the relationship and the relationship helped me do it. But some people probably still want to have I would really have the principal come in and talk with them, or the dean, or whoever, whatever your admin structure is like. And especially, like I said, the person's been at the school a long time, most likely they probably have a really good relationship with some of the administrators. And so that might be a better conduit for some of the information, actually.
And when you were talking, it was making me think about, is there another, I'm making an assumption that this person is head of their department. They might not be. But is there another head of department or another person with kind of the similar teaching style or same level of seniority that they could then talk to this person to get that kind of expertise? If the content expert doesn't perceive me as the coach as having enough experience, maybe there's someone else at the school, whether it's a school leader or another department head or another colleague who's been there the same amount of time, that has a similar level of experience to them. Maybe that is really important to them. And that's another avenue in. It's maybe less based on personal relationships and more based on professional relationships, but that could be another avenue, either having them talk to the person or you going to that person and saying, look, I want to support the content expert teacher. I'm really struggling. I know that you're doing all this kind of stuff. How did you get there? What are some strategies you might recommend that I could use with this person to help them see the possibilities that are there?
And in the scenario that we're looking at, it's saying that the school is moving in this direction. So hopefully, that there's a very clear goal and understanding, and the admin is leading that as well. So that gives you other, this can make a big difference. Just this one piece of this is if this is the direction the school's moving and there's very clear goals about it and things are very transparent, that helps in the sense of like, we're all moving this way. I'm here to help people move in the direction that the school's going. If you don't have that piece, sometimes that's a whole other scenario to talk about as well. But if you've got admin who are like, this is where we're moving, they're very well versed in talking about it. They've got relationships with the teacher, then definitely, going as more like, I need some advice on, how I might approach this person. And
just to give a different sort of shift to how you might go or who you might ask to support, something that we're really well networked people. So we've got a lot of contacts and we know a lot of people in different schools who do those particular roles. Recently, I had a geography teacher who was looking for different inspirational emerging technology ideas that he could bring into the classroom. And he's not on Twitter, but I put together a Twitter list of geography teachers, high school geography teachers from around the world who he can follow the group and just get all the information. So he doesn't have to be the person like actively going out and finding all of those things. So I can shortcut that process a little bit. And to follow on from that little personalized, hey, I saw this and I thought you might be interested. You're the sort of person that I thought would really jump at this sort of opportunity or whatever it is. Presume positive intent, frame it nicely. But I always find that I get, if I send it, even if it's something as simple as an email with a link to an article that I've seen on Twitter, I often get a little bit more traction than I was expecting because of that personal relationship, I guess.
I found that with teachers. Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
I found that as well. It's like sometimes I feel like I can be kind of a matchmaker, whether it's between people in the school or with people outside the school, like in Carrie Lee's example, and we can help to facilitate. Like when I have conversations and they've just got so much on their plate, it's like, okay, I can go look into that, and I'll come back with some things for you, and we'll take a look at these resources and see what might work for you. So just kind of those little. Sometimes it seems little, but it can really make a big difference.
Now, if we want to go down the subversive route, now this is something I've done. Maybe you might want to get it out later. I recall the situation where I had a person kind of like this, and I actually roped the students into it. I actually knew a lot of the kids that were in the person's class. And I was like, I would talk to them like, oh no, we really like Mr. So-and-so. His class is great, but it's a little dry compared to these other classes, but we get it because it's the AP class and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, we have other AP teachers and you have other AP teachers, and are they all doing it this way? Well, actually, no, they're not. And I was like, well, why don't you just bring it up? I'm not saying judge the person. I'm just saying like, wow, when I was in this other class, we did this really cool, unit, and in that unit we did this. Wow, wouldn't that be really cool if we did it in your class too? So that one did feel smarmy. Like that one, I think it's because I employed the students to help me, but that one did feel like, okay, now I'm really being subversive, but it worked. The person actually took some steps, and I was like, okay, so it was because of the relationship that person had with the kids, and because it came from the kids, that actually moved that forward.
I think you're so funny, Tim. I'm so glad you said that. Something else that I was thinking of is I know that we're not the content experts, but we also, as teachers, we're all teachers of language. We're all communicating, and for the IB teachers amongst us, the approaches to learning is another way that we can connect. So if you have anything that's great for like note taking, we all want kids to be taking better notes or having better skills at revising. Any of those sort of things that you can introduce, whether it be at a team meeting or whatever, those sort of things also have a lot of traction for those sort of teachers. Because again, presuming positive intent, they really do want their students to do well. So,
and I think ultimately we talk a lot about how we work with teachers. The ultimate goal is the students, providing them with the best educational experience that they can have. And so, like Carrie brought up, just something about note taking. Some of these things can make things easier, to make the job easier for them or for the students, and those type of things. And then once they gain some understanding and trust in what you can provide for them, then you can build on that as well.
I think that's it. We're all looking for little ways here that we can start to build trust. And I think that strategy of going in to the areas that all teachers are responsible for, like note-taking, like the approaches to learning, that's a really good way to demonstrate, hey, I actually am really good at this. I can make your job easier. I can help your students get there faster, better, whatever the challenge is. It doesn't have to have anything to do with your content. But once you see what I can do in this context, maybe that can open the door to something we can do in another context. And Tim, you made me think when you're talking about the students, and again, I'm trying to think if I've ever actually done this or if it's just happened organically and I've just witnessed it. But the other stakeholder group that can have a lot of influence, obviously, is parents too, right? So, I'm really just like thinking as I'm speaking right now, I'm not really sure if that's a good idea in this situation or if I would advocate for it, but it is something to consider that if you do have active parents who can handle a conversation like this, I mean, that could be a way to spark another conversation. And maybe it's not the parent going directly to the teacher. Maybe it's, I happen to be chatting with a parent and they mentioned X. Maybe, there are probably ways that if you felt like it was, push come to shove and you needed another avenue, we shouldn't forget the other stakeholders that we have in our community because, it's all about the students, and some other people that care a lot about the students are their parents.
One of the other parts of the scenario that caught my attention as well is when we are working with teachers who are particularly at these higher level academic classes, and then we're not familiar with the content, dependent, because we all come from the classroom. We all have our areas of expertise in the classroom. We've transitioned into coaching roles and director type of roles. Maybe if anyone has any suggestions as far as I have some ideas, but when you run into that, and it's more about how I feel. It's like, I don't know this content very well. I don't have time to take classes to get caught up on this subject area. So how do I approach a teacher that's teaching a content area that I am not particularly familiar with?
I'm going to jump in on that really quick. So it's kind of the opposite idea in a way, because I never was trained as an elementary teacher. And for years, I had never worked with elementary students. And so when one of the departments I was with decided to change our roles so no one was specifically delineated to a certain department, it was like, we all just work K-12 now. That was a big push for me because I was suddenly in charge of, hey, you're going to help the fourth grade team. And I was like, okay. And so one person I turned to was David Lee, because I was working with him. And I knew he was super switched on and just great with kids. And so I said, David, is it okay if I come to your room and just watch you teach for a while? Just so I can get my head wrapped around to what is it like working with, and he was even better. He says, we're second graders. What's it like working with second graders? And then I went to the team themselves and I outed myself and just said, I have very limited experience with this. And I really want to learn because I'm actually really excited about helping you. But I think I need to know something about what it means first before I can. And everybody was like, yeah, come to my classroom. Totally watch me. I don't have a problem with it at all. And so that was very helpful because I learned a lot about classroom management for elementary kids, which helped me later on in my role. But in two, automatically it was like when I took away the fact that I'm the one who has to mentor you, and I said, no, you're going to mentor me, that let me sneak in other stuff. That let me say, wow, and I saw you doing this, and it'd be super cool if you tried it this way. And it was because that conversation became more like, it was peers, like Kim mentioned earlier. Instead of I'm coaching you, it was like, no, we're coaching each other. We're a team on this.
Totally agree with you on that. I think just there's so much having someone come in to watch your class because they want to learn, not because they're trying to observe you and tell you what you're doing wrong. I think that goes a long way for teachers, and it shows that you value and respect the work that they do every day. And I think that's an excellent way of developing your skills. Even if and we all know what it's like when you go in there, you're always going to learn something new. You're always going to be able to perhaps think of a way that you might change something to try a different approach to it, or you notice things that the teacher doesn't because when you're the content expert, you don't notice those things necessarily. So it could be one of those behavior management strategies of like closing the lids of your laptop when you're giving an instruction. It doesn't have to be a giant thing, but just being able to get into those classes, and especially not criticizing or critiquing, especially in those initial phases, is really an important thing that we can do.
And I wonder if, like Tim was suggesting, if we start by going into another person's classroom, not the person we're trying to coach, but someone else who's maybe a little more receptive to our engagement in their conversation in their classroom, because that would also help the content expert teacher see that we're actually trying. We recognize that we have an area that we don't know a lot about. So we're going to take our own time to work on developing those skills. And maybe it's not the right time or place to go into their classroom, but there's certainly someone else who teaches that same or similar subject area that we can observe and learn from.
And I would say one of my, like what Tim mentioned is a big thing for me is that, yeah, I'm very transparent. Like, of course, I'm not an expert on all, but there's no way I could be an expert on all of the content. So I'm here in this role, and this is what I can bring to support the classroom. And really, taking more of a collaborative approach to it, as that we can, work on this together. And I want to learn, and being open to that, I think it can make a huge difference.
And I think related to what you're saying is, well, from my perspective, my background is mostly in cognitive coaching. And that's the belief that the other person has the sort of skills and knowledge within them, but through careful questioning and probing or whatever, then you can help them come to those realizations just through talking with you. So it's almost better if you don't have the content knowledge in those conversations, because then you're genuinely helping them think through things in a way that they may not have considered. And that's been really, like, when that works, it's so exciting for both of you, I think.
I'm taking notes. So is there anything else that is worth chatting about in terms of the content expert? Is there anything we haven't covered? Any other challenges that we have come up with as we're talking? I really think, like, I can't believe how I just trying to read the strategies that I wrote down. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 strategies for this one scenario. So I think
it's been hugely helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
And I think it just goes to show that as coaches, we do get kind of trapped in our own box, and we do think about, okay, well, this is the way I approach this type of person. And, maybe every time I'm slamming my head against the wall, but I just can't see another possibility. And just in this 40-minute, maybe not even 40-minute conversation, we came up with 11 different ways to support this one type of person. So the value of sharing our archetypal teacher and having a conversation about the different ways we would approach them, I think even as all of us were talking, ideas were kind of percolating in our own brains that maybe, like, I know there were ideas that came out of my mouth that I hadn't thought about before this conversation. And I'm sure probably the same is for all of you guys, because just having that conversation, that opportunity to share and think things through is really valuable. All right. Well, then, thank you, everybody, so much for this conversation about the content expert. Hopefully that was helpful for other coaches out there. And this has given them some new strategies for how they might approach a teacher similar to this one. So thanks, everybody, for your time tonight. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out our premium facilitated online courses. We only offer them once a year, and early bird registration is open right now. We have 13 amazing courses you can choose from. Each course is 8 weeks long and goes in depth into a focused topic and includes our best content to take your learning to the next level. Check out all the options in the link below. Courses run from October 7th to December 1st, 2019, and we won't run them again until next year, so don't miss it.
If you've enjoyed any part of this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more great conversations about coaching with inspiring educators from around the world, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the notifications bell to find out every time we release a new episode. To hear the full-length conversation, subscribe to the Coach Better podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you're looking for even more resources to help you coach better, head over to edurolearning.com/coachbetter to explore over 20 online courses designed by coaches for coaches. Catch us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Eduro Learning to connect with us. See you next week on Coach Better Spotlight.